Hello everyone, welcome back to another video where today we are going to be taking a look at what has been said by the BBC bosses, or one of the brand new BBC bosses over at BBC Studios, with regards to Doctor Who and its future, because even though it's basically a reaffirmation of things that we've heard, with regards to them saying, yes, we are going to continue to support the show, there is something interesting in this quote that I want to talk about because I think it reveals potentially where the show could be going moving forwards. But before we get into it, do me a team a little favour and click that subscribe button. It'd be very much appreciated. We are trying to get to 40,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and any support would be greatly appreciated. But with that said, let's dive right in. So here it is, I'm taking it from the Radio Times, but obviously the original quote, I believe, was from Deadline. Doctor Who's future addressed by BBC Studios boss, we're all in it together. He's planning a long future for the Time Lord. This is the write-up by Radio Times, as I said, by Louise Griffin. As I've said before as well, I love their new website design. I really like the kind of classic look that they've gone for here. With fans still awaiting news on Doctor Who beyond this year's Christmas special, one key figure at BBC Studios has opened up about its future. It was announced in October last year that Disney will not partner on any future seasons of Doctor Who. However, the beloved sci-fi series will be back for a Christmas special penned by showrunner Russell T Davies. Of course, it was no secret that the Disney deal afforded the show a much bigger budget. The exact figure was kept under wraps, and during a recent interview with Deadline, Zy Bennett, who is CEO and Chief Creative Officer at BBC Studios Global Content, was asked whether the BBC Studios will still stump up some of the money to give the show a long-term future. Bennett said that he, quote, won't speak for the BBC, but that we're all in it together in terms of keeping Doctor Who on screen in the long run. He added, we're a big important part of Doctor Who, and we're all motivated to make sure it has a long and flourishing life. We've got the Christmas special coming. After that, it's time for us all to work on it. So this is actually something that I find really interesting, specifically the quote about it's time for us all to work on it. Because one of the main rumours that we've been hearing is this kind of idea that it's kind of between two people for the showrunner gig, alright? It's between Pete McTeague, who is kind of the establishment Doctor Who choice, Russell T Davies is really championing for Pete McTeague to be his successor, and Jack Thorne, who is the BBC's preferred, candidate. He's just done the Lord of the Flies adaptation. He is, very prolific, but he also doesn't have a Doctor Who background. So it's between these two, Pete McTeague or Pete McTighe. I keep getting his name wrong, I apologise. Or Jack Thorne, that's the two. And him saying, it's time for us to all work on it together, to me, potentially implies a closer and more, overseeing BBC in the process than we've previously had with obviously the Bad Wolf era, where it seemed like Bad Wolf were basically given complete jurisdiction to do whatever they wanted with the show, pretty much. This quote, and it may be me reading into it, suggests that the BBC may be reasserting some more control over the brand, specifically as well if they are the ones putting up most of the money. The other thing I think this implies is, obviously they say, Doctor Who has a long flourishing life, we've got the Christmas special coming, after that it's time for us all to work on it. Implying that, there isn't really much in the way of like a concrete plan for Christmas, and maybe they will see how Christmas does and basically evaluate from there, which I would be a little bit sad about, mainly because I would have wanted a official directive for the future of the show before ideally the Christmas special came out. If they are going to wait until after the Christmas special to basically decide what the future of this show is and what format it's going to take and all that kind of stuff, that kind of means that, it's going to be even longer before, like, another series or another, set of specials or however they want to do it to manifest, essentially. But I think the other thing that we can definitively say that this does do is, obviously BBC Studios and BBC bosses have been very, very keen to say this show isn't going anywhere. He even talks about the show having, a long, flourishing life. They have been very keen to, say that the Doctor Who is not going anywhere. BBC Studios has said it's a priority for them as a brand. They've said it in their reports. The previous BBC Studios boss, back in July, said to Deadline as well, fans love the Doctor Who brand. It's been that way since before I was in short trousers. He added the team were really committed to Doctor Who and are continuing to look at ways in which we can bring the show to fans. Like, they have been very consistent on this. Like, this isn't just like one person. All of them have basically said, we're going to continue it by any means necessary. As I've kind of said in a video talking about why Doctor Who isn't as dead as you believe, if it was true that the show is as much of a liability as people are making out, it was as much of a, you know, a money drain for the BBC as people are making out, if it was such a failure, they wouldn't have commissioned another special. They just wouldn't have bothered. The fact that they did, pretty much immediately after the deal with Disney collapsed, indicates to me that they still value Doctor Who being on screen. And obviously, we don't know what form that will take after it, but obviously, they seem pretty committed to coming up with a solution for what that's going to be. You know, it's not like the 80s where the BBC basically had open contentment for Doctor Who. It's not the same. We're not in the same scenario. This isn't 1989. You know, people keep comparing it, and it's really not that comparable. And you could say, well, of course they're going to say that Doctor Who is you know, going to be safe and stuff. But I think there's a difference between saying, like, oh, you know, we all love Doctor Who and da-da-da, and actually saying, like, no, you know, we want it to have a long-term future, which is what they've all been saying. That's more of a commitment than just saying, we love Doctor Who, you know? And even then, as I said, in the 80s, they were outwardly saying, you know, you had Michael Grade outwardly saying that, like, the show had kind of, you know, lost its way and all that kind of stuff. That's not what's happening here, you know? I do think that maybe that quote indicates the BBC maybe reasserting more stringent control over Doctor Who, potentially, you know, limiting some of the things that maybe the show can do moving forwards, because obviously they have been given free rein to a certain extent, and maybe there's kind of a fear that, you know, it needs to be more protected in a way, I suppose, because, let's face it, the last couple of iterations of the show haven't exactly gone over well with the public, so maybe they're really committing to, we've got to get this right this time, which I do think is good. But yeah, in general, I think this is just another sign that this show isn't going anywhere. For as much as people like want to say that it's done, it's over, they immediately commissioned a special afterwards, and they're already talking about future plans. So, I don't know. And as I said, like, if you actually look at, like, the ratings compared to some other shows, it's really quite comparable. And obviously, you know, there are shows on the BBC that are doing insanely well and way better than Doctor Who has been doing in recent years, you know, like the Traitors and stuff. I don't deny that they exist. But that is kind of the outlier, you know, especially because, as well, The Traitors is a new show. You know what I'm saying? The Traitors is a new show. If you look at any show that's been on the air for 20 plus years, it's not going to be having the same viewership as it had 20 years ago. Like, it's just unrealistic to expect that, regardless of what you think the current quality of Doctor Who is or has been. But that's all I have time for. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you later.